welcome back to the final part of converting Commander Shadowsun. In this episode I will try to tackle how I converted the foot, and I will also put on the last parts and talk about how to put a few more details onto the model. I too changed the setup a little, adding a bit more height to my cutting leather, and I hope thus you can see a bit better what I do down there. So let's get started. To have enough freedom of movement, I have put all the extra bits that were just blue tacked onto the model off, so we have enough room to work on this. For this stage we want to cut her off from the plinth. The extra height will give us an advantage at this point, I hope. Going from two sides so I don't stray too much and don't lose the front of the foot. We will have to adjust the rock mounting later nonetheless. So just for a quick review, what we want to do is give her this suspensor foot so it looks a bit more imperial. The thing over here isn't yet fixed properly because I don't know if I will use it, if I will use that tiny round Tau original thing and go with this instead to mask a bit of the not quite proportional placing of the additional hooves, so to say. So let's continue. I'll use the two-part suspensors from the Primaris in Scepters, I think. Cutting off that one half of the additional thrusters and getting rid of the protrusion on the inside of both pieces. And then gluing it together, let it dry so we can dry fit it onto the foot of Shadowsun. In the meantime we will prepare one of these armored panels from the k03rnl battle servitors. cutting off one and trimming the front a little bit so we have some extra area to apply the glue. This will later be a kind of pedal or something to bridge the gap between the cloven foot and the suspensor shoe. Let's call it suspensor shoes. Do that while both parts are drying, and then we'll add another beveled edge over here so we can glue those two parts together. We might also just attach one of the hip armor plates to the model. Sometimes you'll have to make parts slimmer, reduce the thickness so they slot into place properly. As long as you try to keep the main viewable outline intact, this won't fall into view when you look at the model later. Put the glue on that side. I have already glued on part of it accidentally when attaching the engine parts, so I roughly know where to apply the glue so that I get maximum connection. That's about it. I'll try to get it to a point where it's clear that it's attached to the upper body and not to the leg, so that it flaps up and down, considering in which direction the leg is moving. So we'll continue with this once all the parts we've prepared so far are fully dry. Okay, here we go. So, as you see, the armor panel lies on top of this area here, and we have to slightly bevel that edge so we get better or bigger area to glue the whole thing together. It's not much. Getting me a little helper here, so I only have to move around, fiddle around with one of those tiny parts. Something like that. Shift it to the middle and get it slightly up so that the hinge looks over the front of the shoe, and we can possibly already see how much of these parts we will have to cut away. Some more. Here again I put glue on both parts to get a better connection. And I'm doing this while the pedal is still not fully cured, so I can slightly adjust the position. And what we have now to do is add a little spacer between her leg and the hip so that the legs don't come too close, and get her fixed to the base once again. So let this dry for a few minutes. In the meantime, let's prepare those stabilizers. They are originally from the Amiga Knights, I think. Just cutting off the middle connector and then I'll, as mentioned before, clip off that part. Like this. And we'll either try, not either, I will then use a file to get that area half round. So the stabilizer fits in there smoothly. Or at least a little bit better than before, so it sits in the middle and kinda gives the appearance that the whole thing is centered correctly. I will make it a bit easier by removing that rivet and making a bit more flat. So if you want to give it the extra time, then feel free to have it fitting a bit more snugly, if that's a word at all. Looks good to me. So after a short dry time and review of the model, I decided to not put a spacer at her hip because the legs don't really touch the feet. I mean, they are just apart enough so that it looks good. So there's only the armor panel on her right to add, and then get her back on her display base, and we're basically done. While the model is drying, I adjust the top of that terrain piece. It's the original from the Shadowsun miniature that we have just chopped off. Nothing specially added so far. And I want to get her onto that like this. For that, it might be a good idea to get the terrain piece off the wooden cube so it isn't that heavy. And using a good amount of glue on both parts. Leave it to dry for about 30 seconds so that we get a proper connection over there. Or at least roughly 30 seconds. And make sure you have stuff around that will help you prop up the model in the right position when you glue it on. So it doesn't come off like this. I'll hold it for a while, press the two parts together, squeeze it around a bit so the plastic merges as good as possible. And after that I'm leaving it propped up . Looks good so far. Angle seems just right. So let's dry this properly, then simply attach the other armor part that we got here fixer to a fittingly sized base, and we'll see us again in a minute for adding some details. So, after letting all the parts dry properly and attaching the display rock to a larger base with some parts of sprue as spacers so I can fill up in between with green stuff, I added the armor panel on the other hip and also added a batch of cables over here and over here to connect the suit with the weapons. Feel free to use whatever you like. That part over here is from the Adeptus Mechanicus Dominus Tech Priest, and I think the part over here is from the K03rnl Servitors, but I'm not sure. Just have a look at kits that have cables or stuff like that on the sprue, like the Adeptus Mechanicus. Iron Strider has some. Grey Knight's Terminators often leave arms in the sprue where cables are attached, or you could use Scion Server Skulls or the Adeptus Mechanicus Electro Priests are among my favorites. I don't know why the brightness has adjusted oddly for this. I hope it's okay with you. I hope too that this tutorial video was easy to follow and that you had good insights into how I work. Please be so kind to leave a comment, leave constructive critique if you please, so I can make those videos even better in the future. Stay tuned, be excellent to each other.